Welcome to everybody. My name is Beth Soderberg. I'm one of the co-organizers of the Meetup. Leland Fiegel is also one of the Meetup organizers today. So let either of us know if you have any questions. We're excited to have our first actual presentation in literal years. And Nick is a longtime person that I have admired on the internet. And then I finally met him in person a few years ago and was like, oh, he's just as nice in person. Because he used to answer, I guess, Genesis questions in forums. I think that's how I originally encountered you. In any case, I'm always excited to hear Nick speak, and I'm extra excited to have a little traction and getting our meetup back together. So thank you very much for being our very first speaker back. And thanks to all of you for being here. Yeah, so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Nick. And feel free, he's got a link for questions. So Nick, feel free to manage questions however you want and let us know where you need backup.
All right. Well, first off, thank you, Beth. Thank you, Leland, for having me to speak. Miss meeting in person. I'd love to see you all, hopefully in the next couple of months in person. I imagine a bunch of you are going to be going to WordPress DC, or sorry, WordPress US, which is going to be just up the road from a lot of you. I'm going to be driving through Baltimore actually that weekend, but unfortunately, fortunately, I get to go to this really great camp with my kids. It's for kids with limb loss or limb difference and their siblings. So I'm excited to be looking forward to that, but sadly, I will not get a chance to see all the people that I love to see again or meet for the first time. I have dropped in a link in the chat. It's also at the top of the slides. Hopefully everybody is seeing the slides being shared, and that will let you ask questions. I will be able to drop in. I can share them onto the screen, all kinds of fun stuff like that. If there's anybody having trouble using the questions, let me know. It should allow anybody with the link to ask questions, though. I'm going to hop right in. Today, I'm going to be presenting a content creator's guide to maintaining accessibility. The audience this is for are content creators. I do have one little bit of code that I'm going to be sharing, but mostly the goal is to help people take the lessons that you learned today and be able to ensure that your sites are accessible, at least as far as the content you're creating. Kind of the big assumption that I have starting with this is the wrapper portion of your site is accessible because you're using an accessible theme and accessible plugins. I am a web developer. I currently work with Reaktiv Studios. You'll see the reaktiv.co at the bottom of my slides and that first slide that was up. I'm a lead developer there. In fact, why don't I just hop on over to this? Just a little bit about Nick. Decades of experience, lots of A11Y, that's accessibility, letters, and family, and I'll talk about that real briefly. I work at Reaktiv Studios. I got into accessibility really for the very first time many years ago whenever I was doing construction and had to start making the college campus that I was working at, make sure that things were accessible, doors opened correctly, had the correct pull weight, all of these different things, bathrooms were accessible, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then digitally, I thought I knew a lot of stuff about accessibility. I attended WordCamp DC a few years ago and sat on this really great talk. And the speaker encouraged everybody to use a screen reader to check their websites out. And so I did that. And I had worked on creating a plugin, Genesis Simple Share. And I'm like, oh, this is going to be super accessible. It's great. I thought through all the different things that needed to be done. And I hopped in to use it and pulled up the screen reader, and it was very awkward and things did not work the way that I expected them to because I never did it. And so I started figuring out why it didn't work the way I thought it should work and spent a lot of time fixing the accessibility issues that I found. And that really ignited a passion in me to start creating more accessible things. I ended up getting web accessibility specialist, 508 trusted tester, and a few other letters that go with different certificates. and have really progressed a lot into this realm. I live in Northern Virginia. A lot of you all live in Northern Virginia. I always tell people, think Country Roads, though, not by John Denver, not DC. I'm out in Front Royal. So when I look out my windows, I see nothing but trees, and it's a really lovely place to be. Last one I have there is family. That is last because to me it is the most important. I'm 24 years married, so next June it'll be 25 years. I have 4 children. 2 of them have survived to adulthood so far. The other 2 are not far behind that. And so we're looking forward to making sure they all make it to adulthood. We also have 2 dogs in our family, and basically stay really busy between all of those things, as you can imagine. Quick description of myself, if we have anybody here that is visually impaired. I am male and use pronouns he, him. I have dark hair. It's currently pulled back in a ponytail. Otherwise, it's very shaggy. I have a shaggy beard, and I'm wearing a dark blue shirt I got from DQ University that says digital equality is my jam. All right. So today's agenda, I want to start off by going through a very brief accessibility review, and then I'm going to look into some key ideas around content structure, alt text, links, contrast, tables, and then we're going to talk about a few tools that are available that you might want to consider using. And finally, we'll close with some checklists before hopping into Q&A. So our big section is accessibility review, and then hopping right into that. I'm not going to dive into everything WCAG. That is kind of the overriding kind of rules behind what it is to be digitally accessible. But let's look at the numbers. So WCAG includes, and then there are 4 guiding principles. This is POUR, POUR, which is perceivable. So all content may be perceived by all users regardless of ability. Operable, which is all interactive elements may be operated by all users regardless of ability. Understandable, which is the content can be understood by all users regardless of ability. And robust. So the content and elements will work on all current and reasonably foreseeable future devices. Within that, there are 13 guidelines, and these kind of help organize the next level within the WCAG, which is the success criteria. And there's 87 success criteria as of WCAG 2.2. Now, this is the current standard. A lot of folks are focused on WCAG 2.1. WCAG 2.2 came out earlier this year, and they are currently working on WCAG 3, but it will likely be years before we see that happening. So at this point, really focus on WCAG 2, either 2.0, 2.1, or my recommendation is 2.2, which is the latest. It just added a few things and changed a couple small things on a couple of the success criteria. Within that, they have A, AA, and AAA conformance levels. A being the most basic. If something fails an A level conformance, it means that it is completely unusable to a great number of users. If it fails AA, it is unusable to many users and certainly can have a lot of improvement with it. And if it fails AAA, then it's generally considered a minor thing. It can be improved upon. The target that most people focus on is going to be WCAG 2.1 or 2.2 AA. And that means that your site is going to be, generally speaking, considered accessible. These are the things that the theme and plugin creators really need to focus on. Developers and agencies should consider this when they're making the site accessible. But once we've done all of our work to make a site accessible and ensure that we're handing over this thing that is accessible, then content creators are going to be making content on the site. And there's a lot of things that can affect accessibility with that. And instead of focusing on like 87 possible success criteria, and it's very finicky to understand that and difficult, a lot of those things don't apply to every part of your website, and will really help to focus instead on 5 topics that we're going to cover today, and 5 tools that can help you with accessibility. And finally, we're going to look at a checklist of 12 items. And I feel like those 12 things that we can really drill in and focus on while creating content is going to be so much easier than 87 success criteria. And so I hope that you can take that away today and start ensuring that you are creating more accessible content, which is going to make your site available to 25% of the users who have disabilities. It's going to make your site usable and indexable. Everything that we do for accessibility kind of improves indexability as well. And overall, we're going to make a better user experience for all of our users. So that's going to be 100% of users that are going to have a better experience because of what we create using more accessible content. I was just looking at the audience tools before I moved on, and there's a couple of great questions, and I will address those here when we get to the end. But anyways, so kicking things off with the 5 topics that we're going to consider, we're going to look at content structure. And with content structure, there are kind of 3 major things that we want to watch. There's on our screen now, it says content structure. We've got the heading that says 3 things to watch. And then on the left is a bullet list that says headings, list, and other content. This makes up the main portion of your site. It's what you're going to put into the block editor if you're using the block editor. If you're using the classic editor, it's a lot of the similar things that we need to consider, but I'm focusing a little more on the block editor today. There's a ton of blocks that can be added, but most break down into the basic elements that we're going to be discussing. So the media text block is an image, which we'll talk about next, and content blocks. So content blocks are going to include all kinds of things like headings, lists, block quotes, all of these different things that are basically text that goes into the page. We also have layout blocks like columns blocks and things like that. Those things typically don't have a huge effect on accessibility. If you use them in certain ways, it causes the text to go really overflowing or do strange things that affects the robustness of it. But if you're using them without making like huge changes in the layouts, letting things collapse correctly whenever it goes to mobile, that sort of stuff, it's not going to make a huge difference to your accessibility. So we're going to focus a lot on those content type blocks. We're going to talk about headings and lists kind of separately from all the other sort of content because they have what we call semantic meaning. When we talk about semantic meaning, then the idea is that the markup there has an inherent meaning that the browser understands and will apply some default styling to so that it looks a certain way. We can override those styles visibly, but whenever we do that, it doesn't carry over into how a screen reader understands that. And so a screen reader is going to always see that as a heading, or it's always going to see that as a list. When we do it with a block quote, it's always going to see that as a block quote, and it carries with it certain baggage, so to speak. And there's no way to divorce that baggage from what that element is. So that's what we mean when we say something is semantic. The other content portion is just a huge sweeping category. It's going to be the paragraphs, it's going to be the block quotes, it's going to be group blocks that we've styled and various other things like that. So let's look into these a little bit, and then I'm going to go hop over to some examples to show you kind of how this lays out. One of the things I really want to bring into this is we can make things accessible and beautiful. We can make things accessible and interesting, and we don't have to sacrifice those things as long as we're thinking about the ideas of what it means to make stuff available to all of our users. So headings should be concise. Writing 3 paragraphs of text into a heading is a terrible experience. Writing even like 3 sentences of text into a heading is not a great experience. And that has to do with a lot of different things, but it makes the headings lose their meaning for one thing. People get lost and muddied in the middle of all of that. And so they don't read it, and it affects the overall user experience. And it also can cause problems with the way that spider bots perceive and understand the way your content is laid out. A heading should be understood fully without the context. And so this is one that I've really had to start implementing into my writing experience lately. Is I would tend to have like a higher level heading, like an H2 heading that gave my content context, and then my H3 under heading would assume that you knew what the H2 level was. And so it didn't have all of its information there because it was bringing with it my interpretation that it has context by itself. And so we'll talk about this. Headings help to organize content, and they follow semantic ordering. When we talk about semantic ordering, we mean that our page level heading is an H1. Then we have H2 headings, and we might have 2 or 3 H2 headings, and then we have an H3 heading, and then maybe an H4 heading and another H4 heading, and then an H3 heading. And we can jump back up to an H2 from any point, but we can't go from an H2 down to an H4. That affects our ability to really kind of understand the flow of the content. And that affects SEO. It also affects screen readers and other users that are kind of tied directly to that semantic structure. On the other hand, we have lists, and lists can be ordered and unordered. There's also a thing called a definition list, but we don't have access to that unless we're using plugins right now. And I'm focusing a lot on core materials, so we'll just talk about ordered and unordered. Lists typically have a marker to indicate that they're a list visually. I mentioned before we can change that, but it doesn't change that semantic functionality. So when a screen reader user encounters this list, then it is going to they're going to always experience it as a list. Lists are also intended to be understood as a unit with minimal context. So a list may inherit context within itself. You can have nesting items, different things like that, but the overall context of the list should be fairly contained. So we don't have things that, and ultimately what this is because screen reader users, especially when they're interacting with a website, can experience lists completely out of context. They can experience headings completely out of context. They can experience links, which we're talking about in a little bit, completely out of context due to the way that they're able to interact with content on the site. So other content is going to include things like quotes. So when we think about quotes, we want to always make sure that we're using actual quotes in a quote block. We're not just kind of doing a pull quote thing. If we want to do a call out or a pull quote, we can address that using a group with some settings to control the way that looks, to ensure that it looks like a separate call out or pull quote. Paragraphs, it should be relatively short, just a couple, 3, 4, 5, maybe 6 sentences. The longer they get, the harder they are to consume. This also is a huge improvement for all of our users, because we found that when people read, they get lost in huge blocks of text, and we should break everything up. So we should also have each section have relatively few paragraphs with headings that are built around all of this stuff, which is going to make things so much easier for all of our users. But again, that's also going to be a big improvement for accessibility and for our SEO. So let's see if I could hop over to on the wrong thing here. I'm in here. There we go. So I just set up a local test site, and I created this post. The title is Accessible Content Example, and I've got a little short paragraph here. And then I have this heading here. And when I click on it, hopefully everybody noticed that this actually says paragraph. And if I were to scroll down to the very bottom of this, I've got a tool we're going to talk about, but it's going to say incorrect heading order. And if I look in and drill into what's going on with that, it's because I use styles to visually represent a heading. And so, this is just a scenario where we would want to come in and change this to an actual heading. I bring this up because I have run into this with clients on a shockingly regular basis, and they have just gone over to the typography styles and changed font sizes and made things bold, and maybe change the letter case and stuff like that on regular text to make it look like a heading. And I have to change it to an actual heading, and I have to give instruction that when you're using a heading like this, if you're having to change all those styles to make it look like a heading, it probably is a heading. And so start thinking about that sort of stuff, that we want to use these headings. It's going to improve, like I said, our SEO. It's going to improve our accessibility. It's going to make our semantic structure correctly. We can review this content. So I go from an H2, I hop down to an H3, I have another H3. I've got this great call out that I set up. And so we'll talk about contrast in a moment with this block, but I just created a group block and I made this align wide. I used background, added a gradient background to this, and I made sure that my text worked for this and is accessible. And then I used the new padding controls to make sure there's a little padding around this so it doesn't just run the text right in and cause some weirdness to happen. Now we're back up to another H2. We're going to be talking about alternative text here in a moment, and I've got some examples of some things that we can do with that. Another H3, another H2, and then another H3, an H4. And one of the things with this is we're actually changing font sizes to do this and make these things stand out and look a very specific way. So that really helps to ensure that our text and everything works right. This one is an H2, and it should actually be a paragraph because 250 doesn't really make a ton of sense there. And so we can change these to paragraphs, and that will resolve one of the other errors that I am getting down below. And you'll notice that there's some weird underline stuff. I'll be talking about that in a moment. Anyways, back to another H2. We've got another H2. We've got a list there. We'll talk about lists here as well, H3. And so we can see that as we're scanning through this, it really starts to explain the layout and structure. All of these are kind of complete ideas that, again, in the past, I might have said alternative text here, and I might have said alt text with AI or just AI even here. But now I'm starting to write a little bit more with my headings and make sure that they really explain what we're talking about. And that's also, as I said, there's so much benefit to all these things, and we think, oh, it's 25% of users. We're talking about 100% of users that are going to gain benefit from this. We're talking about accessibility that's going to gain benefit from this. We're talking about search engine optimization that's going to gain benefit from this. So again, I've got some information about lists. You'll see that the lists have less information. It doesn't have to be fully there. By itself, it's going to provide enough information. So lists, block quotes, and paragraphs, that is a condensed and consolidated bit of information. I've got an ordered list that's going to give some instruction here. And so you'll see this paragraph there. You can also use an unordered list if the sequence is meaningful. An excellent example of that would be instructions to follow in order. So the sequence here is how to create an unordered list. Start a new line in the block header, enter a dash at the start of the line, press the space bar, start typing, press the enter key to start a new list item, press the enter key twice to exit the list and create a new paragraph block. So very simple instructions on how to do this. You'll also notice that my paragraphs are all fairly short. 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 sentences. And the reason for this is certain users are going to struggle with longer blocks of text. All users benefit from this, but some users have much more difficulty reading long blocks of text. But having regular headings to break things up, regular lists to break things up, regular callouts to break things up, shorter paragraphs, simple language, which we'll talk about in a little bit, all improves the user experience. So that's going to get us into alt text. And one of the big takeaways that we're going to talk about with alt text is we want to make sure that alt text is meaningful and explains the purpose and use of the image. There's a ton of growth in the AI industry. A lot of people think that AI is the solution for everything, and AI can be a good tool for alt text, but it's not going to solve alt text completely. Why did I use a banana here? I used a banana here because people often say banana for scale, and it's a bit of a joke, a bit of a meme. They'll take a picture of stuff, and it's not totally accurate. You hold a banana up to your head, banana for scale. I got a huge head, look at it next to this banana. But at the same time, you could take that banana and hold it up, when you're in Paris, and take a picture of it, at arm's length, and it looks larger than the Eiffel Tower if you're in the right position. So bananas don't make great scale. And I think that when we think about alt text, if we don't use it correctly, it's like trying to use a banana for scale for a picture of the Eiffel Tower at a distance from arm's length for the banana, and it doesn't really work. So when we use alt text, we should consider the reason and purpose for the image, not just a description of the image. In a moment, we'll look at this, but alt text is a description of the image, definitely. It covers the purpose and reason for the image, and any content that appears in the image is text. If you have content in the image, like text in the image, you must include that in your alt text, period, end of story. The description of the link, if the image is linked. So if you are linking the image, where are users going to go? Because otherwise you're going to have a link that's going to, example.com, whatever. And the user that's going to hear this is just going to be banana on a pink background. Well, what is going to happen when they click that link to banana of a pink background? That is not where they're going. And that is going to be very confusing for users. They're going to have to click on it, find out what they're going to, and then come back to your content. So the other thing we have to think about is alt text is primarily for screen reader users, secondarily for SEO spiders. What alt text is not is for keyword stuffing. I'm going to say that one again. Alt text is not for keyword stuffing. It's intended to be longer than a few sentences, no longer than a few sentences. That's a typo. It's intended to be no longer than a few sentences. It is intended for inside joke. It is not intended for inside jokes or Easter eggs. And it is not supposed to start with image of, picture of, anything like that. That's going to be included by the screen reader, so you don't have to say that. It's going to cause for a weird experience. But let's look at our, oops, I'm on the wrong tab again, over here. All right, so provide alt text for images. I've got a bunch of text here, but this one is really great. Meg Miller did an excellent presentation on creating alt text right here, titled The Alt Scene, When and How to Write Alternate Text. I would encourage everybody to watch that. I'm going to provide a link to that. In fact, why don't I go ahead and grab that and drop it in the chat right now. I don't know if that did this right. Sorry, I thought I copied that correctly. And this is a wonderful presentation that was done last year at WP Accessibility Day. I'll talk about that a little bit at the end. Again, back to the idea of AI generated alt text. I've got a media text block here. It's a really great way to have our media and our text. The AI generated text for this image was a banana on a pink background, accessible content example. And that's because I set this plugin up that's injecting this to use the title or the Yoast SEO keyword with it. And so you can see we're just keyword stuffing, and it's not a great experience. If you look over on the right or down here, I've created a little bit better description. It's a banana with exaggerated shadow on a pink background, used to provide an example of how out-of-context images need context to anchor them. And so I'm providing just a little bit more of a story about what's going on with this image and why this image is here. I'm not saying don't use AI. I'm saying use AI to get yourself started. Give yourself an initial description and then look at it and say, is this enough? What more can I add to this? How can I explain what is going on with this image for why it's in this particular context? Is there something that a user is missing because they're not seeing this image that's in front of them and all they're getting is banana on a pink background? And how do we answer that question in a way that's helpful? So don't rely on AI to solve all the world's problems. Rely on AI to get yourself started to make things better for the users. The last thing that we want to talk about is keep your image descriptions reasonably short. Due to the way that images are read to screen reader users, they can't skip around through the content like they could through text on the screen content. And that can make them very frustrated whenever they have paragraphs of information being read to them. If there's more information than what you can fit in a few sentences, few relatively short sentences, then put that into like I've done here, where it's done with a media text block, or put that into a caption or other kinds of actual on-screen content. More than likely, your other users are going to benefit from this. And yes, Mike, that is true for AI in any context. If you are using AI to get your post started, great tool, but go back and actually review it, edit it, and fix it, because it is not going to be right. All right. So cruising right along, we're going to talk about links. Link text should be clear when viewed out of context. I've mentioned this several times. Screen reader users are able to experience parts of your website without the full context. It lets them skip through, get a good understanding of the layout of stuff, hop around to different things. Because of the way screen readers work, it takes so much effort to go through a full page of content if they already know that there's a link on there they encountered with previously on this page, and they just want to find that and click it. But link text should also describe the link destination. Bonus points if it includes the page title that it's linking out to. Avoid meaningless phrases like click here, because people experience a link and they know to click there, so you don't need to say click here. But it's especially terrible if all you say is click here, and you have some context, like your non-link text says, for some information about how to sign up for my wonderful, awesome, super great newsletter, click here. And screen reader users are just going to get click here. Well, what happens when I click there? What is the meaning of that? So we want to make sure we provide that full information for them. And if the link opens in a new tab, warn the user. Say it. This link opens in a new tab as part of the link. Or just let them make the choice. Kind of cruising through so that we can think of people's time and have plenty of time for questions and answers. Contrast. WordPress includes contrast warnings when setting up colors, but gradients and image backgrounds are hard to measure. And so we'll look at that real quickly. I've got a great tool. Let me see if I can copy this link address to share in the chat to make everybody's lives a little bit easier. By the way, I do have a full link to this slide, to the slide presentation, so you can get all of these links. It'll be going out of my Twitter account, and I'm going to be sharing a bit.ly link to that here in a little bit. All right. So let me preview in new tab. We have this here, and WordPress, if this was just a green background, would tell me if this is good or not for contrast. But with this background, it does not tell me. And so I have this tool. It's a Chrome extension, and I can click on it, and I'm just going to say capture the visible content. And then it pulls it open into this, and it begins scanning it. I've got it set to scan at 7:1. When it is done scanning, maybe something happened. Something did happen. It froze it on me. Okay, I'm gonna get it this time. Maybe I should be a little patient before I click rescan on there, because it seemed to figure it out. There we go. So it puts this little white outline around all of the text, and text that is fully enclosed in the white outline passes. This actually fully passes. There's some wonkiness that's happening here, but as long as you can see the letters encased in that white outline, it means that it is accessible. And so we can scan through and look at all of these items. 7:1 is a level AA small non-bold text. So that's like this text here. We can rescan this at any of these values. So level AA, medium bold, and large non-bold should be 3:1 or better. And then Level AA small non-bold text should be 4.5 to 1. And so we pass on this particular bit. Let's see if I can also look at images on top of text. I have an example right here. And again, I will just pull up my little tool and click there and say, I want to capture the visible content. I can also select a page region if I want to narrow that down to that. It's going to do its scan. And because I set a darker, less transparent or more opaque background, it's going to work there and hopefully get that. Looks like somebody got a problem. Thank you for sharing that. I don't know why it threw a 404. Please elaborate on font weight and size. This is a very long discussion, but basically the fastest way to understand it is headings are typically considered large, medium bold and large non-bold. And regular text is going to be considered small non-bold. It might also be medium non-bold. If the text is bolded onto there, then it would be bold. Maybe it does not work if you're not in Chrome. Yeah, you do have to be in a Chrome browser for that link to work. I'm sorry, this is a Chrome extension. So anyways, there's a lot to go into the idea of all this, but the safest way to understand it is if you're using headings, those are probably going to be medium or large, and they are probably going to be bold, and so they would fall into that category. Regular text, like all of this, would be the small non-bold text. And if I bolded something, it potentially could be medium. They do things based on point size, and different fonts also get affected by it. And it's a really kind of tricky thing, but if you use those general guidelines, it's going to definitely get you there. All right. I'm going to kind of speed through this next little bit here. We're going to talk about tables, and tables are a tricky thing to do right in WordPress. The table block supports some minimal accessibility. The first row can be flagged as a header row, but it doesn't allow you to flag columns as header columns for that particular row. You can't flag individual cells and other things like that. You can also provide a caption or description for the table, and that is helpful as well. But there are plugins that can do things better. And so the Table Press plugin, with a little bit of touch up, can allow creating a more accessible table experience. You cannot use the block to insert it. You have to use the shortcode to insert it. So for example, you might say table ID is 74. You can get the ID from there. And then you have to say first column TH equals true. And so it means the very first column is going to be a table header or TH. And it's not going to actually output the scoping correctly for that. So this is where I said I was going to have a little bit of code. I am not going to read all this. Normally I would, but in the interest of time, we're going to move forward. I have a link to a gist for this, but basically this bit of code will make sure that the columns have a scope attribute added to them if they are a TH and they're not the first item in the row. So it makes sure that that gets kind of done correctly. So I'm going to hop forward and talk about tools. And when I did construction, I saw folks use just about anything for a hammer or a pry bar. Has anybody else done that? You can just kind of give me a thumbs up on your screen. Grab like a tape measure to try and drive in a little finishing nail. I've seen people do that. Use your drill as a hammer, which is such a terrible thing to do to your drill. It will bend over nails. It doesn't work correctly. It damages your equipment. And the truth is, using the right tool for the right job is going to make such a huge difference. And yes, this is the original Unsplash photo. So we talk about a few tools. All these are links. They all go out to the WordPress repo for this. So there's WP Accessibility that was written by Joe Dolson. He is one of the accessibility leads for WordPress. This plugin will allow you to turn on certain features that can help address potential shortcomings in your theme. Depending on your theme, you may or may not need this. Accessibility Checker is by Equalize Digital. This will help scan your page. We'll actually look at an example of this. Screen reader text format is something that I created. We'll talk about this in a minute, but it allows you to use text format to indicate that some text is screen reader text. Lang attribute for the block editor. Whenever you are, your website's all in English and then you have a little bit of Spanish on there or something like that, you should tell the users, tell the screen readers, tell Google that this little bit of text is actually in Spanish, and it's going to save you so much trouble on so many different ways. But when it comes to screen readers, it just makes sure that things are pronounced correctly. Otherwise, some weird stuff happens. And the abbreviation button for the block editor is another similar tool. It adds the ability to mark up some text as an abbreviation, allows you to define a title for that, and makes things more accessible. So just looking very quickly at some of these tools. Oops, there. Starting off, we're going to scroll down to the bottom. I already kind of showed this, but once this is set up, it will start scanning your page every time you making updates. It's going to scan the page in the context of the website. It flags some errors, and so this has this insufficient color contrast, and this is some stuff with the theme, and it has to do with, I think, the way that some of the screen, some of the text is being hidden. And so I'm just going to ignore this. And so you can kind of ignore things. You can comment out why you ignored it, but I don't want this to keep showing up. All these are kind of the same thing. I've already reviewed them. But it lets you see what the text is, what the code is. You can view it on page, and you can find out why this is a problem. So we've also got this improper use of a link, and I've actually done this correctly, but it starts with this get started, so it's being flagged because a lot of times things that say get started are not very helpful, and there's 3 of them that start off this way, and so it's flagging all of them. I've done this correctly, though. If we scroll up and look at that, we'll do that in a second. So again, I'm going to ignore these. And oops, I've already actually ignored some of those. Oh, I need to ignore this last one. And that's going to resolve that. And then there's some warnings here about things that are already hidden, which is correct ish. And so I'm going to ignore it. It's part of the theme, and it's not something I'm going to really focus on fixing at this time. And ignore. So overall, it's pretty good. It gives us some information about what we can do to make our website better. The other great thing it does is it can do a readability scan. And so it says my rating level is 6th grade, and so I don't need to create a simplified summary. Otherwise, I should create a very simple summary of the content here, and that can be inserted at the top. The screen reader text format is used right here. I have it turned on to always show. You can uncheck that and turn it off, and so it only show whenever you're actually there. So it kind of gives you a preview of what it looks like without this always showing. But to turn it on to always show, whenever we have struck out text like this and bold text and other things like that, screen readers are not notified about this. So this is a really common layout that we do, and we have a price table. If we're striking out content, this could be confusing for screen readers unless we say this is not included. So we're able to actually put this in. And what I did was I typed out my text. I selected my text. I pushed the down arrow, and then I checked the box that said screen reader only, and that made the screen reader text. Again, my buttons, they all started when I pasted this in to say get started, which is very unhelpful for anybody. But I added the text, get started with the basic plan. And the best case scenario is always going to be put the entirety of that text there. You can see that some wonky stuff happens with this button because of the size of all of this there. I could probably rewrite this, make it a little bit better. But for this example, I just used some screen reader text. Same thing, I typed it all out, I highlighted it, I clicked the button here, selected screen reader only, and now whenever a user sees this, they're going to see it like this. But if somebody is using a screen reader, it's going to read out all of the information that's there. And so that's super helpful. I have an example somewhere in here. Oh, it's the top of my thing. A11Y is an abbreviation. Not everybody knows what that is. And so we want to make sure that even if it seems really common, really useful, everybody knows this, let's go ahead and define that. So I highlight that, I click the down button, and I say it's an abbreviation. And then when I do it again, it will, something wonky happened with it, but it's up here, and it should have been right here. don't know what made that difference happen. Let's try it one more time. There it goes. So I can say what this is an abbreviation of, and so I'm just going to say accessibility and apply that. And so this puts title text on everything so that when you hover over it, it says accessibility, it'll read this out to screen reader users as well. And somewhere in here, I have Kel Surprise. I don't remember where it is, but it works the same way as the other ones. There it is, Kel Surprise. And all it does is add a span around it with the correct markup. So again, if I change the lang attribute and then try it again, it might go wonky on me. It did. Let's try. That's what it was. There's a bug there that's kind of fun. And this is just French and apply that. So we're able to define the language attribute for things. Those are really helpful tools. I encourage folks to give them a try if you're using other languages on your site, if you're using abbreviations on your site, if you're using any kind of markup that you might not have the best possible things, if you're striking out content, etc., like that, and you need to notify users about what is going on with that. The screen reader text tool is great. And the accessibility checker is one of the best plugins that I've worked with for accessibility as far as the usability of it. It does such a great job of telling you what's going on with your content there. I've got 10 ignored items. Everything else is good. So, oops, I want to be here. And I said that we're going to have some checklists we're going to talk about. So when it comes to checklists, there's a ton of amazing resources that are available for content checklists. This can help content creators quickly review the content to ensure that it's following accessibility best practices. This right here, pre-existing checklist, if you go and do a Google search for pre-published accessibility checklist, you're going to get a ton of results. And a lot of them are very, very good. And the interesting thing, or maybe not so interesting if you understand why, is higher ed has released so many of these. Almost every higher ed institution has one. And this one I have a link to. I will, oops, what just happened? I will grab this link if it will let me. Okay, or I will open this link. Sure, let's look at this real fast. And drop the link in here though. So it lays this out. It shows you kind of our top level. There's 7, if I remember correctly, maybe 8 page structure. And then it talks about the things that it means. Titles, and it talks about what it means. Text content, it talks about what it means. And a lot of these things, almost all this is stuff that I actually talked about today. And so you can just check it off and it kind of marks it all out so that you know that you've done it. This is a great tool, and it's I highly recommend it. You can use this over and over again, just reload the page, and it's ready to go again. The problem is sending your users off site. Do I have something in the wrong? No, I don't. Sorry, sending your users off-site to do a checklist, your editor's off-site to do a checklist is not always a great experience. So there's some WordPress plugins I'm going to recommend. There's pre-published checklist by Brainstorm. There's published press checklist by Published Press. And there's pre-published post checklist by Andrew Mead. These are 3 that I reviewed, and they all work great. The first one, pre-published checklist by Brainstorm, it's a simple tool. It lets you create different checklists for any public post type. So you can create a checklist for posts. You can have a different one for pages. You can have a different one for whatever custom post type you might have. You can make the list required, a warning, or have no notification. And that's kind of all there is to it. Published Press is a little more granular. You can make individual items required or not. And you can also specify who is allowed to actually check it off and say it's been done. So maybe you've got a bunch of people that are creating content as authors or contributors, but you want to make sure your editorial team reviews it before it's signed off. And so you can say only editors are allowed to approve this or anything like that. So it's a lot more granular. Pre-published post checklist is kind of the most simple. It doesn't allow you to do stuff for different post types or anything like that. It's got one checklist that you set up and maintain, and everything is there. The biggest drawback to all of these is you cannot have an export or clone feature to make it easy to share a checklist. So I put together kind of a starter level checklist. There are 12 items here. Content is organized in sections. We talked about the page title and SEO title accurately reflect the topic of the page. We talked about that. All links make sense when read out of context. We talked about that. Link descriptions are clear about where they lead. We talked about that. All images have appropriate alt text. We talked about that. There are no images of the text unless it cannot be rendered without an image, and the text is described in the alt text. Any graphs or diagrams have accompanying text to explain the meaning. So that's kind of a special thing whenever we're using graphs and diagrams as an image, that we want to make sure that that's fully explained. You can't really do all of that inside of an alt text. I mean, you could, but remember I said when they get too long, it gets complicated for users. So we want to actually have a secondary block of text that explains all of that. Lists are used appropriately. Any data tables include appropriate header rows and columns and a caption to describe the table. And any video includes captions, transcripts, and if possible, audio descriptions. We didn't talk about this, but this is kind of an important thing if you're using multimedia or audio, to always make sure that you have captions and transcripts. Transcripts are huge for not only accessible users, but there's no way that Google knows everything that's going on inside your video. And so you want to make sure that you have transcripts available to it. And that's where all of your SEO kind of crawling is going to go through that transcript. Any audio embed, what is going on? Any audio embed includes a transcript of the audio, same thing we just talked about, and then languages have been set as needed. And so, accessible, that's the one. I set up a checklist, and it appears right here. This one is using the published press version. Some of these are required, and so it has a flag up here that is saying I can't publish right now until I check some of these off. And the ones that have the star are required with it. And as I start checking things off, if I clear all the ones that are required, it will let me publish. Oh, I also have to add a featured image, which was something that I set up in there. So we're just going to use the banana. And so now I should be able to publish things. Did I miss another one of these required? Yeah. So it's just going to flag these again right there, that these are ones that I did not check off, but we can clear them all out and it'll work. So this is a great tool and resource that will allow us to make sure that right in our dashboard, all of our editorial team is able to verify everything. And so I definitely encourage you to check that out. Remember, I'm going to be sharing a link to the content here. All right, we made it. Q&A, and I do have 7 questions I'm going to be hopping over to. But before I hop in there, I've got some links. Let me share some of these in the chat very quickly. That is a link to the slides. I will also be tweeting it out. Nick_the_geek is my, I'm going to keep calling it Twitter. I hope Elon will forgive me. Copy link address. This is my link tree, and that will get you to Twitter and Threads and all of those good things. This is the table press code that you need to make that accessible. It's just a gist. And then WP Accessibility Day is coming up, and I definitely would love folks to check that out. They will have some amazing presentations. We've got a great speaker lineup already. We are looking for volunteers still, so you can click on that site, click on the 2023, and you can check the box that says volunteers. In fact, let me just show you real quickly. Let's just do it live right now. So click our events, and this year's event, visit the site, and then click here that says volunteer, and you can find out all about volunteering, and then click apply to volunteer. So please, we can use volunteers. All right, now for our Q&A. Mike Ritter asked at the beginning, JAWS or NVIDIA. I actually use, I'm on a Mac, and so I use neither. I use VoiceOver on Mac, and I will say that when I use a a PC, I use NVDA. If you are not sure what those are screen readers that you can test with. And the great thing is NVDA is free. And so if you are a Windows user, search for NVDA. Let me put this up there. JAWS or NVDA. NVDA. So search for that, get it installed, and they've got some information on there on how to use it. Follow the kind of tutorial to get yourself started, and you can start using it. If you are on VoiceOver, you can do that. Let me grab one more link real quickly for everybody. EQ NVDA quick start. Reference. Let me drop this in here. This is a great one page to show you some tips on how to use NVDA, and then voice over keyboard shortcuts on Mac. I will tell you right now, this is kind of a tricky thing, but it says like VO, and what that means is hold down Control and Alt, unless you've changed the default settings. So VO means Control plus Alt, and then whatever key. So like VOU will bring up your rotator and stuff like that. So Control plus Alt and U will bring up the rotator, which is one of the ways that you can access things out of context. All right, so the other question that Mike asked was, are accessible overlays acceptable, and why is the answer no? I mentioned that AI is not where it needs to be, and companies that are using accessible overlays, they are relying on AI, they're relying on taking over the user experience, and actual disabled users have said that it has broken their user experience. And so when actual users say it breaks their experience and makes things less accessible, I tend to believe them. So short answer is no. Long answer is really no. There may be a day where these overlays, I don't want to mention them by name because there is a guy getting sued right now by one of the companies. But they are solutions that promise to make your site accessible in day one. Anyone that says they're going to do that, not going to work for you. They are solutions that use a lot of things like you're going to get sued unless you use our tool to make your site accessible today. That's high pressure sales. It is exactly what you would expect for a car dealer to tell you the same thing. It's the same thing you expect whenever you get the phone call that says, we're here to talk to you about your car warranty. It's the same thing. So I will just say that. In fact, let me drop a link here for you all. Okay. So this guy, Adrian Roselli, has written several things about this. And if you look through his content on things related to overlays, then you will find a lot of information about why overlays are not great. And I will put that there. So that is the long and short on overlays. Is Lighthouse a good starting point? Anything you're doing to check your accessibility is an amazing starting point. Use Lighthouse, use apps dev tools. I showed another one there real quickly that I use this accessibility checker, but I have Wave is another great tool that lets you check your accessibility, and it's doing weird things. I'm just going to refresh that because it's doing weird things. What happened? The wrong thing happened when I did that. I don't know what happened. Hopefully I didn't lose stuff. I lost my questions. Oh, wait, I can continue. Sweet. Sorry about that. Okay, there it is. If time allows, please describe what progressive enhancement means regarding JS animations. Okay. How are we doing on time? Leland, are we doing great? Folks don't mind hanging out for a minute? All right. So progressive enhancement means regarding JS animations and why to avoid common design patterns, those stack counters, scrolling transitions, moving on hover, sliding images. Long and short of it, if you are using things that move, scrolling transitions, etc., the thing I love to tell clients, my number one goal is to make sure no one throws up when they visit your site. If someone comes to your site and throws up, we messed up. So that should be our first goal, right? People come to our site, they don't throw up. We have won the first battle. When we have things that are moving in two directions at once, it can really trigger people to have migraines. I'm a migraine sufferer, and it can cause me migraines. It can cause people to feel nauseous and literally throw up as a result of it. It can just make people feel really gross. It can cause seizures in some cases. Lots of weird stuff happens. And so when you have things that are spinning, that are rolling, that are scrolling, and they're moving in from different directions, we're using actual true parallax where you're moving down and things are moving up at the same time. That is a huge one that causes problems. Progressive enhancements means that we are adding to the experience by paying attention to what users are asking for. So I always like, I've done a whole other talk about this, but we have things that are called media queries, and we can check on stuff and make sure that they approve of motion or have requested reduced motion and listen to that. We can use fade in effects where stuff is not moving, but the opacity is changing. That is really a safe effect to use most of the time. But whenever somebody is asking for us not to do motion, I usually just like to snap it on and snap it off. When we are adding progressively to it, it means that we are making our basic experience with JavaScript off is the page, or then we're adding on to those experiences. But again, anytime we start adding in movement, we have to really think through what we're doing and always listen to the media queries that users are able to do now and say, I do not want to have stuff that's happening. All right. And speak to the importance of images for images and text for text, controlling text design with styles, not images. This is one I always run into with my clients because the designer makes this great image that they want us just to put on the website. And it has all of the text, all of the stuff, and it looks really great. The problem is that it's completely uninteractive. There's no way to really pull that out. I can describe everything in it using alt text, but whenever a user has certain kinds of accessibility, certain kinds of disabilities, they might use features that let them zoom, and they might use features that let them change contrast, and they might use all these different things, and they don't work well with images. So whenever we have text inside of images, it can break their ability to change font sizes and other things like that that normally they rely on to be able to access stuff. So it becomes very static. The other thing I always make sure my clients know is when we start putting text into images, it affects our ability to respond to devices. And so if I'm looking at it on a mobile device, I think we've all done that, where all of a sudden the text is like microscopic. I'm at the age now where small text does not work well for me. And so we look at it on my phone and I'm like, because it was an image, and so everything shrunk down to this super tiny size, and I'm having to like zoom in, and it's really awkward and difficult. But whenever I separate that out and I have images and I have text, and they're two separate things, I can do all kinds of stuff whenever I shrink that down onto a device, and I can make sure that it stacks or that it does different things so that that information is usable. I can link individual pieces of text or individual images. But when you have it all in one thing, then you're suddenly having to do some really wonky stuff with image mapping to try and lay it out and put in links. And it's a very frustrating experience all across the board. But when we separate it out, it becomes more accessible. It becomes better for SEO because we can start using in semantic markup, and we can put in headings, and we can put in other things that you can't have in an image tag, and it allows better ranking. It makes things more accessible for responsive design. I mean, just all across the board, when we start doing this correctly by separating our images and our text and using them right, and it doesn't have to be ugly. You know, I showed you know, here wrong one. Sorry, I apologize. I clicked one too many times. Here we were able to use you know, this overlay and have a very dark overlay behind it, have this great looking background, and it carries a lot of stuff with it, but we could do even more with that. There's ways to create layouts. We can, you know, use our price blocks. We can use things like that. And I've been given this by a, you know, price list by a designer that's laid out really specifically, and they want to have a certain look, and all of it is just literally an image, and it's not a great experience. But whenever we can put it together and do these things, now suddenly we can add in screen reader text, and we can add in all these different things, and it becomes a much better experience. And it doesn't have to be an ugly experience. It can be a beautiful experience, but it needs to be done in a way that is open to all of our users. And let's see, Mike asked several questions. Laura said, did the callout block have a heading or just a large font paragraph? That was a heading. So let's hop back and look at it real quick. So I did a group block, and I set this to wide width, and I turned, sorry, cancel this. I turned off this inner block use content width, and then I just set the first level of padding, which gives it a little bit of room around it. I set the background, I set the text color, and then I started inserting blocks. And so I have an H2 heading here, and this might be better off as a H3 heading, actually, because it really falls under this use headings to organize your content there. So I'm going to change that, actually. But I liked it with that big text, right? So I'm going to increase. Ooh, that's way too big. We're going to come back here and go to, I don't know, maybe that was about 3 rem. It might be 3.5. Yeah, that looks good. In fact, I want to center that even. I think that'll be good centered. That looks great. I love that. Pardon me. I'm going to grab a drink real quick. As you can see, I was able to use the correct semantic markup in H3, but still get the size and everything that was there. And then, oh yeah, we can wrap it in an aside. It doesn't need to be an aside. In this case, just to call out, it's actually in line with the text, but there are times where you might even make it an aside. And so, see, that's under advanced. And so you can actually change this to make it a header, which sometimes I do that for certain things where I have a header at the top that has a bunch of stuff, and I turn off the regular page header. You don't want to use main more than once, so we're not going to do that. But you can say this is a section or an aside. You only would use an article if it actually had an article inside of it. But in this case, I'm just making this a call out, and it's more of a visual representation than anything else. I don't need to tell screen readers anything about that. But yeah, it's a really great tool that's available to us. All right. Oops, I have not changed this back to my. And thank you, Laura, for that question. Mike said, how should we be styling links? This is such a great question. This is really more of a theme level thing. But if you are a theme creator, my #1 suggestion is underline your links. You need to it's tricky dealing with links because a link needs to have your minimum contrast, so 4.5 to 1 for your block of text. And then it needs to have contrast if you're only relying on the color difference of a blue link against black text or something like that. It has to have a contrast of 4.5 to 1. But then when you hover over it, if you're not underlining it on hover, then you also have a contrast of 4.5 to 1. And there's only about 3 colors in the world that you can possibly use that you're going to run into. The question link currently reads, sorry, question answer. Oh, I can fix that. All right, I toggled a bunch of stuff, Leland, so hopefully that's working. Leland was telling me this that was not letting people ask questions. So let me share that link here again. If anybody had questions. Whoa, what did I click? See if that works for folks. I toggled it off and on again, so hopefully that fixed everything. So long story short, underline your links, and then it can be underlined on hover, or it can just always be underlined. You can have it underlined and then have the underline go away whenever you hover. Also, whenever you're styling this, anytime you do something on hover, just do it on focus as well. It's going to make things so much easier because of the problems that I pointed out of having 4.5 background to 4.5 of your text color, 4.5 of your link text compared to your body text that's surrounding it, and then 4.5 to 1 of your link text compared to the background, compared to the body text, compared to the link text. All of those things have to have the same minimum contrast of 4.5 to 1, and it really becomes difficult. Kate says, Kate McDevitt, I apologize if I ever pronounce anybody's name wrong. I should just say Kate. That one's easy. Regarding accessible links, I'm always giving content like, this is a reminder that the process is now online. Please provide members with the following link. And there's a link there. How best to rewrite this sort of thing? So there's a couple of ways to handle this. I'm kind of assuming that the content is literally, this is a reminder that the process is now online. Please provide members with the following link, and then here's a link. So I might say, this is a reminder that the process is now online, and literally link the words, the process is now online. Members may find the link and put the URL in there, but do not link the URL. If you link something with just the actual link word, it reads out really weird, but you can put the text in there and then somebody can copy that and paste it. But if you've got the link in there, so reminder that the process is now online, the process is now online is the link text. Leland gave an example. Next. Oh, this is a reminder that the registration process is now available. Please share with members so they can complete their registration online. Oh, that's a great example. So I'll put that up there. This is another good way to say that. So please share with members so they can, and this is using Markdown. If you're not familiar with it, so where it says complete their registration online would be the link text, and then the link is the, online registration example.com. I love that you did that in Markdown, by the way. That is a good example. Yes, Leland, that's a great way to say that. So anyways, the point is that, the link text complete the registration online is a wonderful way to say that. You can also share a URL if that's what you're intending to do, is to say, here is a URL that you can share. You can put that URL in, but I do not recommend linking that URL. And so it allows people to copy that URL and share that URL. So let's see, can I reply to things? I cannot reply to things. The best way that I could say this is just like Leland has on here. This is a reminder the registration process is now available. Please share this with members so they can complete the registration online. And you have that linked, or share this URL, and then you would have just the URL there not linked. And that would allow people to copy that URL without it being a second link that has a really funky way of saying that. Hopefully that helped explain things. It looks like we are out of questions. We have gone for a little over an hour, so I think folks have been good. Kate says, that's how I've been rewriting it. thanks to you both. I appreciate the mobile options too, and appreciate your question, and I appreciate all the other questions. Again, thank you all. I really am glad that you were able to bring that. Okay, I'm really glad that you're able to join us today. I hope that you were able to take this information and start making more accessible content. Definitely hope that those tools are going to be super helpful and useful for you all to make your content more accessible. Reminder, I've got some links here. Let me share one more time in the chat if I can just copy. Nope, it's not going to let me do it without ending. All right. So the most important link is the slides link right here. I'm just going to copy this link address and I'm going to drop it in the chat. Oop, I'm on a direct message. There we go. Drop that in the chat. That will get you to the slide deck, and then you can access all the other links that I have here and some links that I might have scattered throughout the content. Leland, do you want to say anything to close this all out? Or Beth? I see you in the chat.
Sure. Is Beth still here? I'm not 100%
She's in the
sure.
chat. She may not be able to close things out.
Beth. Well, I'd be happy to close things out. First of all, thanks so much, Nick, for sharing this. This was super interesting. I learned a few things. One thing that stuck in my mind was the pricing table and how you see the struck out text. For some reason, I never thought of that before, that you should just say not available. And then you were wrapping that in a screen reader text class to basically visually hide the text. But for screen readers, it says this is not available. Otherwise, people might be like, oh, well, this is available. And then they're confused and they're like, I want a refund. I thought this was available and it's not.
Yeah. Yeah, so that anytime you strike things out, bold things, all of these things that you have, like if I highlight some text and access this and all of these things that I can do to mark things, highlight, stuff like that. Some of it doesn't matter if you indicate it, but especially struck through things is a huge one. Definitely use that screen reader tool to say this was struck out.
Yeah, for sure. And Beth did say something. I'm here, can't figure out how to talk out loud. So, okay. Well, I guess it's
same.
Yeah, I guess it's me who'll talk to close it out. So yeah. Anyway, announcements. There is WordCamp US. I don't believe there are any more tickets available. There might be like the sponsorships available, the micro sponsorships, and those are like $800 or something like that. So if you don't want to buy the micro sponsorship and you still are interested in WordCamp and don't have a general admission ticket, there might be volunteer things available. Don't quote me on any of this because I'm just speaking off the cuff. But yeah, hope to see some of you at WordCamp US. That's the next event I'll be at. And as far as WordPress DC specific stuff, we'll be in touch via the Meetup website and their notification system. And once again, thanks so much to Nick. This was super interesting, and I know a lot of people appreciate information about accessibility. So thanks again.
Yeah, thank you. I was just answering a question that was asked in chat. Thank you very much. And again, sorry I won't be seeing folks at WordCamp US, but I'll definitely wave on my way through both DC and there. And appreciate all you coming and listening to me.
Awesome. Sounds good. Well, thanks for all the attendees for joining us, and we'll see each other soon, virtually or maybe in person. I'm not sure. We're still looking for a venue, I believe.
Great evening, everybody.
Awesome. Bye, everybody.